When it comes to designing practice, I think it's important to have in mind how it relates to the game. And the more I think about how you practice and why you practice, the more convinced I am that the more direction you can have in a practice, that is going from one end to the other, the greater chances that there's going to be a transfer of training into the game once players start performing. The alternative to that is to organise practices, the typical little possession games or positioning games, whatever you want to call them, and they basically go round and round, I won't say in circles, they go around in different size areas and from one area to another, and they have their good points. But I've always questioned the transfer, and the more I think about it, when it comes to players' reactions to defending tasks, if you've got a definite goal behind you, then you react according to that. And it's similar with attacking play. If you know you've got a target in mind, whether it's a goal or whether it's just two small goals on either side, or just getting the ball over the end line, the fact is that you are definitely going in a direction. And I think that then enables you to be able to relate the sort of behaviour that you want players to adapt and learn much more readily. So I would encourage directional type practice with opposition if you can do it as much as possible. Now that doesn't mean to say that you don't have other practices that don't have direction. By all means you do, and they're good for technique practice, passing, receiving, opening your body up, all these sorts of things. But I would try as much as possible to use direction. That's all. It's getting the balance right. I'm going to show you how you can organise a directional practice with any number of players between 6 and 14. I'll start with 6 players, and the aim of the practice is to get the ball from outside one end to the outside at the other end of the grid. The practice always starts with a numerical advantage, e.g. 2v1 or 3v2, and will either create a 2v1 or 3v2 at the other end, or a 2v2 or 3v3, etc. It would depend whether there's an odd or even number of players in the practice. This practice has 6 players, and the aim is to get the ball outside the grid at the other end. Notice there will be a 1v1 in the end grid because there is an even number in the practice. This practice has 7 players, so there will be a 2v1 in the end grid. Whenever there's an odd number of players in the group, it's a good idea to have a floater in a different coloured bib who can play for whichever team has possession. So when possession does change from one team to the other, it's easy to organise and just change the floater periodically. This is the practice for 8 players, and notice how the red player is ready to challenge the yellow as the yellow gets on the line. Now to stop this from happening, make the rule that the reds have to be close to the back of their area until the yellow crosses the line. This gives the yellow player some time and space at the beginning. This is the starting position for a group of 9 with the floater. This is the starting position for 10 players, or it could be 3v2 in the first grid, then 1v1 and 1v2 at the far end. This is the starting position for 11 players, with 2v2 in the middle area and floater in blue. The starting position for 12 is 2v1 in the first grid, 2v2 in the middle and 2v3 at the end. It could be 3v2, 2v2, 1v2, whatever you decide. When the number reaches 13, I suggest starting with 3v2 in first grid, then 2v2 and 2v2 in the others. Just remember to adjust the size of the areas to suit the ability of the players, and it's much better having too much space than not enough. Starting with the practice for 6 players, the red player in possession takes the ball into the middle section to make a 2v1 situation. The other red player tries to get level and outside the yellow defender, so if a pass is received, the first touch will take the ball past the defender and allow forward movement into the end zone, where another 2v1 can be created. The objective is for one of the red players to finish with the ball outside the end zone. The Reds keep the ball and try to get to the opposite end of the grid by passing, getting level and outside each yellow defender, or by dribbling in the 1v1 situation in the end zone. The Reds come back to the starting position and have another go, or the roles change and yellows start. If the yellow defender wins the ball in any of the zones, the ball is played to the starting area and play continues. The player in possession can pass or dribble to reach the next zone. The supporting player just gets level and outside the defender to provide the opportunity. The practice with 8 players starts with a 2v1, and if the attacker progresses to the middle zone, another 2v1 is created, followed by a 2v2 in the end zone. If the play is successful, the yellows start again from the opposite end, and the Reds reorganise to have 2 players in the end zone. A progression is to combine the groups of 6 and 8 players and have 3v2 in the starting zone, 2v2 in the middle zone and 2v3 in the end zone. The objective for the yellow team is to get a player with the ball beyond the end zone by either passing or dribbling past the opponents. If the team is successful, the ball is played back to the starting zone. The players quickly reorganise to start with 3v2 again and play continues. If the Reds win the ball at any stage, they try to get a player with the ball beyond the end zone in the direction they are facing. There are significant benefits of structuring practice this way. The first is transfer of training, and by that we mean how similar is what you're doing and the decision making that's involved in the smaller practice and compared to the main game. Does it change much? So the closer it is, then the greater the chances that you're going to get a good transfer once you go from the small picture into the big picture. Another factor is that when you break down into smaller groups, you get a lot more repetition. And we all know how important repetition is to learning. So the benefit of working in smaller numbers before going into the bigger picture is really important. Working from the small picture and where decision making and behaviour is virtually the same as what you're going to have in the big picture means it's easy to progress from, say, a practice of 6 to a practice of 14. And the benefit of actually working in areas such as the grids that we discussed in the practices is that you control the space and you also control the positioning of where defenders can start. As I recommended, get the defenders to start near the back of the grid so that they're not on the line when players bring the ball straight to it. That way you can control the pressure that players are put under from defenders. That's one good thing. Now, the other good thing is that when you're working in these sorts of environments, there aren't that many decisions that a player has to make. So if you want lots of repetition about decision making, do I pass, do I dribble, do I play a 1-2, if indeed that's on, all of these sorts of decisions are related to exactly the same scenario in the game. So you are not allowing them to make long passes or to pass it in any other direction. When you've got a 2v1 or a 3v2, you limit the choices that any player has to make at any one time. It's also the case for the supporting players, and whether they run back behind the ball or level with it or in behind the defender that goes to pressurise the ball, they are limited to only a few decisions. So you get lots of repetition. So there's a quick summary of the benefits of practicing this way. There are other ways of practicing which I'll deal with in separate presentations.